Here we go.
Lead the charge, yeah?
So welcome everyone again. Very, very special welcome as well to Mani Rahi, who I fortunately met at a Subdial event. Now we know Subdial, brilliant watch company, second-hand watches and all of that, and great place to go. And they also do the odd drinks. And the story goes, Justin, who is useless, despite being a watch guy, he's useless with time.
Yeah.
Absolutely useless. So you stitched me up. You decided to
How was it?
leave
Was
me
it
at
an
the
hour
altar.
before or 2 hours before the get-together that I pulled out?
Yes.
I pulled out really very, very late in the day. I felt terrible about it. I really did. And I'm pleased and grateful you're still speaking to me afterwards. But by all accounts, you had a lovely night. And I totally forgot you guys met that night.
Yeah, we did. It was a very fortunate meeting. Pete, Justin, thanks for having me. But it was a great night. I didn't know anyone coming into the event, and I think, Pete, you didn't either. And it was, let's get a drink, and then I found the nearest group, and we just ended up in the same group, and spent the evening just chatting watches, and it was great.
It must be, for a lot of people out there who aren't super watch geeks and don't go to events very often, it must sound like a bit of a strange one. How does it actually unfold? How does an interaction between two watch lovers unfold? Is it do you catch the eye and then check the wrist, or do you check the wrist first and then touch the case, or how does it work?
Can I jump in here?
Yes, sorry, Pete, sorry.
Because after you left me, I was sat at a pub before needing a couple of drinks to get some Dutch courage going. I never go to events on my own. This is not the sort of thing I do. Scared shitless. Well, I don't know if I can swear, but I have now.
No, you can.
And so then went to this event, and I saw Mani with a few other guys, and everyone was in their groups, and everyone was wearing like the coolest watches. I wanted to chat to everyone, but I was in that sort of like, how do you approach people you don't know on your own and go, excuse me, can I join in this conversation? And so I was like, do I just grab a drink and go home? And it was that moment where I was like, oh, I'm not sure. Went up to Mani, who was in this group of guys who all had really cool watches, and I just went up and said, excuse me, guys, I'm here on my own. Would you mind if I just joined in your conversation? And Mani was so friendly and said, we're all in exactly the same boat.
Yeah.
And so that's how it went. That's how I met Mani. Sorry, I've just stolen your thunder.
No, I mean, that's kind of how it went down, and everyone in that group did the same thing as you, really. No one knew each other. Everyone came together, and it was just a kind of collective love of watches that brought people together, and made it a little less awkward to start up a conversation, because everyone knew what the first topic of conversation was going to be, right? Watches.
And we're all in that unique position as well, where how often do you go out and have a group of people talking about niche things about watches?
Because we know that we want to go out, and often we can't because we're with our partners or whoever it might be, and or close friends who don't get it, understand it. So we know that ultimately you were actually doing exactly what you wanted to do, was cut the shit straight to the good stuff, which is, let's talk case sizes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's cool.
Yeah.
What took you there, though, Manny? What? How did you get there? Like, did you buy from Subdial or?
No, so I'd been following Subdial for a while online. I just thought they were a company who were doing something really interesting and different in the UK watch scene. It was a breakaway from, the kind of stuffier entry into watches, which a lot of firms, I think, still struggle with, and maybe struggle to attract a younger crowd. And I just think Subdial were young, they were fresh, their branding was on point, and they were bringing together a community in a way that I don't think any other watch firms had done. And so I signed up to their to their clubhouse, right? And I think to get into the event, you needed to write some sort of like spiel about why you should be there.
It's like when you're applying for a minute repeater at Patek.
Right, exactly.
Or know the right people who don't turn up.
You've got to write like a half-page essay to FP Journal about why you need this collection, right?
Yeah, did you see that?
I did.
King Flynn.
Yeah.
King Flynn, well done, sir.
And,
great piece.
So I wrote something incredibly long, and they let me come to the event, and I think that's how it all transpired, really.
You're absolutely right. They are doing something different to everybody. I mean, it's, but by the way, guys, this is not sponsored by Subdial. If Subdial want to sponsor this, Tim Green, you're going to get a copy of this. Please give us some cash to sponsor this show. But the reality is, it's not sponsored. And the truth is, they are genuinely doing stuff community-wise, because a lot of businesses talk about community, but very, very few action it. And to me, they are doing it in a very, very cool way. It's interesting that you can see their business online and still understand that they're a young group of people. Their faces aren't all over it, but you can still get the sense by the way they're shot, the watches are shot, they're talked about. It's a young group of people.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
So when we then first met, obviously the conversation was solely about watches. I'd like to point out, by the way, Mani I think the story goes, when you're not that intelligent yourself, hang out with more intelligent people, and it sort of rubs off on you. So Mani trained as a doctor in private equity now, so is in, here's a guy who knows his stuff. So what, though, got you into the dirty business of loving watches? Because, I mean, it's a slippery slope. So what was the first moment that you remember that you went, oh, that's cool, or any reason? What was the first moment that you thought, I like watches?
Yeah, I think I think it's really difficult to like pull those strands apart because they're all so intertwined. I remember, I think my first ever watch was probably from my grandmother, and it was some bad rendition of a Rolex Submariner, just done with, in the same style, rotating bezel, dive watch aesthetic. Wasn't expensive at all, but I remember loving that thing. And it also had like a special sentimentality because it was from my grandmother.
Do you remember her wearing it?
No, it was mine. She bought it specifically.
She bought it for you. Okay.
She bought it specifically for me.
How old were you as well?
I must have been 11 or 12. And then kind of from that point, I remembered, my brother getting a watch for his 18th birthday. It was just like a fashion watch for his 18th birthday from my uncle. And I would have been 15 or 16 at the time and thinking, on my 18th birthday, I really hope I get a watch, because it was just a beautiful way to commemorate kind of coming of age. Unfortunately, I did, and I wore that thing for a long time. But, as a 16-year-old, I kind of looked at my brother and envied him. So when it came to my 16th birthday, I said to my parents, I really want to watch. And I remember going to the Bullring in Birmingham and going to the Swatch store and buying this beautiful 36mm time-only watch with like a concentric ring dial. And I still love that watch to this day. And that was really, for me, the first moment where I had chosen my own watch and picked it. And I think that's really where it kicked off.
And have you kept that watch?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I still wear it to this day. It's one of my favorite watches. And
colourful?
No, it's very subdued. It's almost like one of those like Patek Calatrava roulette dial kind of things. It's got a similar aesthetic, but I still love it.
And I'm guessing that the fact that it lasts or has lasted all this time and not fallen apart isn't.
Well, it's fallen apart, but I've just made sure to I've just made sure to change the strap on it, change the battery because it is a quartz watch, or take it into the Swatch store and say, hey, this isn't white, this isn't the dial, the hands aren't moving. Can you help me fix this? And just shake it about, and usually it starts working again. But, yeah.
So where did it transition then? Because I mean, we've done my watch journey, which is similar. As in, I remember getting my first watch was a Fila watch, and losing it on the beach and whatnot. But then I do also remember that first time where I spent serious money on a watch.
Yeah.
When you have to spend your own money, it's not given to you by your mum or your dad or whatever. So from there, what was your next step? As in, you obviously kept that watch.
Yeah.
But what was your next? Because I know you, and I imagine that you've got a similar brain to us in terms of what's the best watch can I get? What's the most quality I can get? As in, so what was the next step after that?
So I think the next big step up was a Rolex Datejust, and it was a 1978 Datejust quickset date, and I did a lot of research on that watch. It was trying to find the right first watch, right? And it was reading Hodinkee and watching YouTube videos about, what should be the first watch. And there's so many opinions on what a first watch should be. And I think there's a lot of opinions about what a first watch should be, as both, in terms of entry level, in terms of price, but also something that wears well, is timeless, and is classic. And I went through that kind of journey of the space of 6 months. And then when I finally graduated from medical school, I decided to pick that up. And it was a really special piece. It's a matte blue dial. It's quite rare. There's not many of those around. And I had it shipped from LA to my mother-in-law, who lives in Kansas City. And then I went to go pick that up from Kansas City when I was visiting. And so I'd actually never seen the watch before buying it. And after I'd bought it, I still had to wait another 6 weeks before I could go and see it, which was really difficult.
Something you said there, because you said earlier on you were influenced a little bit by your brother in terms of what had happened to him. You said as well there, you read so much as in what should be your first watch.
Yeah.
So you were influenced
Absolutely.
by a first watch.
Yeah.
And so in your mind, what is a first watch?
So I think that's a great question, right? And I think at the time when I was picking my first watch, I was trying to get the experience of other people to tell me what is the right watch. And I think as I've gone through my journey now, I've realized that there is no right watch. It's the right watch for the individual. And you kind of develop your own aesthetic, your own style, what you really enjoy about watches. And then it kind of takes you in a direction. I mean, if we look at the 3 watches that we're wearing here today, everyone is wearing something completely different.
Yeah.
It's not a uniform.
No,
right?
no.
And I think that is what I've realized as I've come through this journey. So in terms of what's the right first watch, I think follow your heart rather than follow what's online.
I'm amazed that you read those stories. We all were influenced and we all read tons of stories generally, but those stories that start with the perfect graduation watch, it tends maybe to be more American media, I think, that covers those types of stories typically than European. But you're right. You know, the reality, whenever I see them, I'm thinking, wow, like there are so many metrics, there's so many different factors that go into the decision, let alone budget, let alone aesthetic, let alone vintage, new, condition. I mean, there's so many factors. It's really, really interesting. Who did you get it from in the end in America? Who was the dealer? Was it well-known?
No, it was a small boutique out of LA. I can't remember their name, but they were great. I had a video chat with them and made sure that, you know, they were a reputable dealer. And, you know, they say you buy the dealer before you buy the watch, right? And so there was almost more due diligence on the dealer than there was on the watch itself. And that was quite a nerve-wracking process because I was buying on chrono, and it was, you know, I just had to make sure that it was legit. And so my first watch experience was on chrono, which I think was a big leap of faith.
Did you start with model? Did you start with brand?
I started with model. I think the date just had come so heavily recommended by other people that I started with the date just, and then I kind of narrowed it down. I knew I wanted the quick set because, you know, I wasn't going to be able to wear my watch every day working as a doctor. So I knew that I had to, it was either put it on a winder or just be okay with not having to sit there and wind 24 hours.
Is it true that in America you can, as a doctor, wear jewelry, but here in the NHS or private you can't?
Right,
wear
exactly.
On awards and
So so they
it's interesting
Well,
fact.
it's from LA, so
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So it's an excuse for people in the US to buy nice watches, especially if you're a doctor.
You always watch the shows, the reality shows on plastic surgery or whatever it is, and the first thing I always clock is the fat gold Daytona or GMT or whatever that they're all wearing.
How good a doctor they are. Is it right?
There is also different income in the US to NHS.
Right, exactly.
Let's not go down that road.
No. So the date just you still love it. Watch only or box and papers or
box and watch, no papers.
Yep.
And I love that watch. It was the reason that I bought that watch is because I was engaged at the time and I wanted a watch for the wedding. So that is a watch that I will never sell. That's going to go down to my kids. It's going to be an heirloom piece that, you know, I love and look after for generations, hopefully.
You've just gone through that process of buying watches, using weddings as excuses for buying watches for yourself and others.
I'm not
it's the ideal time to do it, right?
Don't have the money to buy everyone a Rolex date check. I love that.
Didn't the groomsmen? No, the groomsmen didn't get.
The groomsmen didn't. Yeah,
they did got to watch.
They all got
G-Shocks.
to watch G-Shocks. Yeah, the Cassiopeas, because as you know, big AP fan. So I thought, you know, got to give them a little bit of that. They're all really happy with it.
We'll have to get them on at some point for an episode.
And bought my now wife is in Reverso, which I engraved.
And we've got to get her on for an episode.
I mean, that is a cool piece.
We'll get her honest opinion. Maybe I'll just do it without you here, and we'll see if she likes the engraving. If she likes it,
she has been wearing it a bit, so that's a slight win. But going back a little bit, as in the buying off Chrono 24, I think that is ballsy as well with your first. Because I remember being told there was a fellow tennis commentator friend, ex-player, and he was really into his watches, and I was I love my watches. I'm looking for that first big purchase, and I just, because it was like, it feels like eBay, right? As in, you just don't know who to trust. It felt like such a big marketplace. so that's great that they did a video call with you, because I think it puts a lot of people off, because when people come to me and say, oh, I'm looking for a watch, Pete, you know your watches, what's the best deal, where's the best place I can find the deal on it, and you often say, hey, look for that model on Chrono 24, have a little look, it's safe, it's good, as in but it's still, people don't do it, and it's only taken me till about my sort of 4th or 5th watch where I finally took the plunge, and now I feel you still have to do your due diligence, but now I feel comfortable. But to do that for your first big watch,
big
that's a big
You've only got to look at what's happened at Philips in recent times with the Omega
exactly.
to just appreciate that it happens at every level. You know, you could be spending 1,500 quid on that first watch or 1.5 million on that. You as the buyer have to do that due diligence on the seller and the watch itself, because each watch does come with its own. The number of mistakes I've made over the years, and
You have checked that watch through right now.
but really cool. So you've got that now. So you've got the swatch in the watch box. You got the date just, not date just, the date in there as well. What came after that?
So we've had a few short-term holds. So I bought a JLC for a while.
Okay.
Which I loved a lot, but
what model?
It was a Master Control.
Okay.
I like that watch a lot, but I didn't find it was getting a lot of wrist time. So that's gone away, unfortunately. And then I actually switched careers about 2 years ago. So as Pete mentioned, I went from medicine to working in kind of private equity consulting. And at that point, I'd just gotten my signing bonus, and I wanted I think it was an office appropriate watch in my head. I think it was just
There could be an episode just on that subject alone.
right.
What is appropriate? Because there's the non-compete, the swatch, there's there's the big player, the Nautilus, the vibes, which everyone knows.
Yeah.
Where do you meet? What was appropriate?
Well, I figured that everyone under like 30 or late 20s to early 30s was wearing a sub. So I was like, well, I'll get a modern sub. And that, I mean, I love that watch. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was an incredible watch. I think Rolex gets a bit of hate, particularly modern Rolex gets I think slightly unjustly. I think they make incredible watches. They're really well made. They can be a bit vanilla sometimes, but they are coming out, as we were talking before, they are coming out with some super interesting new stone dials, the Tiger's Eye dial, Falcon Eye dial, and, the kind of emoji watches. So they are coming out with some really interesting stuff, but I wore that watch to the office, the sub, quite a lot, and I really enjoyed it. It was very office appropriate.
They're hyped for a reason, right? Rolex
Right.
Yes, they can be a bit plain Jane in terms of to watch geeks like us. It's sort of like you see a sub, you don't know whether that guy's into his watches or whether he's just bought a sub because it's a Rolex. But again, that watch goes with everything, right? You can wear it with absolutely anything. And I always say they're the most overrated, underrated watch because they are, built like a brick shithouse.
Yeah,
exactly. You can do anything.
That's what I loved about it.
They last forever, as in. I mean, when you talk to people in the industry, they're the ones that least need servicing. As in, so they are incredible and they're innovative in their own way, but as in that is the other side of it. It's like, look, as in they're mass produced. That's the underside of it, where it's like, okay, they're mass produced, you're going to see lots of people wearing it. So identity wise, I kind of always feel you're losing a bit the identity, but you're still buying. I mean, if you can get it anywhere near retail, you're still buying. They're market leaders for a reason.
Agreed. And there were things that I really loved about that watch. I mean, ceramic bezel, it was never going to scratch.
The loom must have been punchy as well.
Yeah, exactly. Which was nice because you could have it on your bedside table. Then you could be able to tell the time at night.
And I think they've designed something there that, because I had a sub for a little bit of time that was loaned to me, and I put it on my wrist and I couldn't take it off because it was so wearable. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that a lot of brands are striving for in their product, is something that just is comfortable and that you integrate very quickly into your life. And the sub, no date sub, it's not far off perfection in that respect.
Exactly. And I specifically chose a no date sub because it just had a bit more history behind it. That's what the original Bond wore.
You'll get that little nod from someone in the room or on the train that you've not gone for the date.
For the date, exactly. Yeah. And so even when you are picking the most...
Also, you had a date, just so as in, one with a date, one without a date.
Right.
Perfect.
So, but even when you're picking the most quintessential version of a Rolex watch, which is a sub in many people's eyes, you're still trying to kind of tailor it to have some sort of history behind it. And I think for a lot of watch collectors, history, the story is so impactful and so meaningful. And just try and weave that into any watch that you buy.
because that's interesting as well. We were talking about Piaget and in our last podcast, and it's not often the history. Sometimes it's how the history's told, and some brands are better at that. Some brands aren't. Obviously, Rolex are the kings. That's why they're the king of it all. But that's interesting. So history plays a big part in terms of your decision making.
Absolutely,
which I think probably leads us nicely. After that watch, you then decided to go really big.
Yeah,
and so got the watch that you are wearing today. And so talk us through in terms of how the journey from that sub to the Vacheron that you're wearing.
Just
today.
to be clear, the sub is still with you, or the sub's gone?
Sub is unfortunately gone.
Sub has gone.
Sub
so we've
has
now
gone.
Got to fund the Vacheron.
So we've now got a Swatch, a Rolex, and what's on your wrist there in the collection. You've got 3 watches in the collection. Tell us what you got there, Manny.
So, so I picked up a Vacheron Perpetual Calendar next.
Jesus Christ. Unbelievable.
So that was the next kind of step up. And again, we were talking about history, and history played such a big part. This is from an iconic period of watchmaking history when the quartz crisis was ongoing and the mechanical watch industry was taking a real big hit. And then, those 3 leading Holy Trinity players come out with, something completely different, which is an ultra thin perpetual calendar, which is the exact opposite of what is flooding the market at the moment. In precious metals, it was just so different. It was for a completely different type of buyer who didn't care just about the time. They weren't wearing a watch because they wanted to tell the time. They were wearing it for something so much more than that. And that's what I loved about this kind of era of watches.
That's amazing. That era is also why we have the watch boom now. Because that was, when the quartz crisis happened, everyone went at the time. I wasn't around at the time, but from what I've read, the fear was, well, you have a watch to tell the time. And it was never... It was like, if you can tell it more,
it's a functional
tool.
Yeah.
And I mean, the AP Royal Oak was a big thing on that as well, in terms of, no, we're going to go in a polished steel and all of this. As in, it, and the market didn't know whether it was going to go one way or the other. Now, obviously, we've got digital and everything else, as in, there is no reason to have a watch, but the watch market is now bigger than ever before. So that is it, for those guys like Vacheron to take that risk, as the Royal Oak and AP did, as in, it was ballsy from them.
Absolutely.
And it could have gone the other way, and we wouldn't be talking about the Holy Trinity anymore.
No. I think these style of watches really saved mechanical watchmaking, because they were so different. It held on to the core buyers of mechanical watches, and it stopped them from necessarily moving out of the market. And so these brands were able to retain a core set of buyers who then essentially helped them through this phase, coming into the 90s, and it really, I think these watches saved the watch industry.
So, in terms of that was the history that drew you to going down that route. It's obviously you got to spend a decent whack to get a Vacheron Perpetual Calendar. As in, what in particular? What else about that watch? The size, the look. What else made you choose that watch?
Yeah,
because I know we were talking briefly before the purchase about the AP variation as well. So it strikes me you were attracted to the complication. So you liked the perpetual complication and the case size, that sort of more modest neo-vintage-esque case size.
Yeah, I think the neo-vintage pull just encompasses quite a lot of aspects about watches that I really enjoy. So the more modest proportions, those kind of 36 to 37 millimeter, I think they sit well on my wrist. I think the slightly different design aesthetic that the neo-vintage typically holds compared to more modern watches is something that's also incredibly appealing to me, and it is very attractive, I find. And so, we had that discussion. I was kind of flip-flopping between an AP and this Vacheron, and I think they were both incredible for very different reasons. And after speaking to both you and Ben from Watch Brothers, who was, shout out to Ben, he was really helpful.
Ben boy, expert.
Yeah,
he's carved himself a niche in that neo-vintage space.
He really has.
Very,
And he knows this space so well. And he knows these watches, the history of them, and is able to point you in the direction of a fantastic watch. And so that's really what gave me the confidence to go out and buy something so complicated, so expensive, and so rare.
By the way, guys, sorry to interrupt. We don't have a rodent infestation. If you can hear anything in the distance, that is there's
Someone trying to get in and take the
Vacheron. There's somewhat going on next door, so apologies for that. But what's really cool is we talked about trust earlier, and when it comes to watches and dealers, nothing says trustworthy more than someone who points you in the direction of someone else. And I know in this instance, Ben pointed you in the direction of the guys at Mr. Watchley,
that's right,
in Belgium, and that that says to me. That's a man you can trust in Ben. So just a side note.
But also the AP, right, was mother of pearl.
It was a mother of pearl dial AP. It was incredible.
And was it the fact that it could crack? Is what was the deciding factors in the end that made you go with this one?
Yeah. So with the AP, I mean, it was such an incredible watch. It was a mother of pearl dial. The only thing on it, there was a crack in one of the sub dials, which, when you're buying vintage, it's condition, right? And
sorry, guys, might not be a problem, don't know. So but you're right, it is condition.
It's really all about condition. And so what I did was I called up the guys at AP. So, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about buying this. Can I send you some photos? Can I send you the serial numbers? And can you check it out for me? So they looked through their archive. They said, hey, the serial numbers, they match. So this watch looks good on paper at least, but you won't know until you bring it into us and we can properly have a look at it. And I think because it was from, that kind of late 80s period, there was a slight crack on the dial. I don't think there was very little hope of ever replacing that sub dial. And I don't know if you'd ever want to as well. You just kind of want to keep it as a whole.
And that's actually a really good point as well. So I think we've talked about this as well, like scratches on your watch, as in when they first happen, you are like, oh my God, I'm looking at it and this is now no longer perfect. I remember my first scratch on the Elegant and I remember just thinking, oh no, I've got that scratch. That's. Whereas now, with this one, I'm yet to get a scratch on it, and I'm almost looking at it every day, going,
when's it going to come?
Where's the scratch? And then if it does happen, it's like, well, that's your watch. If you hand it to anyone else, you're like, well, that's my watch because that's the scratch I had in this moment. This is how the scratch happened. And so initially you hate it, and then you actually sort of learn to love your scratches. So I do think when you buy a watch from someone else, and it's an older watch, if it's their scratch, there is a little bit in you that goes, oh, that's not my scratch.
Yeah.
That's not my indentation. So I don't know whether that...
And I think there is something to be said for a scratch, aesthetic, condition, versus something inherent. For me, that dial issue is something that I won't be able to unsee personally. I've got to watch that the dial was changed on, and I can't unsee that because of that. And so I completely understand. For me, it was a no. Immediately when you said it, it was a no go for me.
Yeah, and I think obviously having your experience there was really helpful, and just having someone to use as a sounding board to make that decision. And the Vacheron had so many incredible things going for it. I mean, it obviously still does. And you were able to put me in touch with Ben, and Ben was able to recommend Mr. Watchley Max out in Belgium. And I think everything just felt like it fit better with the Vacheron. And there were some like really endearing features about this watch. It's a transitional dial, so it's in between the kind of first phase and the second phase of these watches. So it's got an automatic at the 6 o'clock subdial, which...
Can we have a quick look?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've actually not seen it since it arrived.
So there's probably about 200 to 300 pieces of these kind of transitional dials that were ever made. And, doing a lot of reading on A Collected Man and, Revolution watches and things like that really helped me kind of make the decision and decide that this was the right one.
And what's the dial made of?
It's an opaline dial.
Opaline.
It's so funny seeing just the comparison between the restaurants. I mean, that's why we love watches. We were saying before we started filming the fact that the watches come in all shapes and sizes. But proportionally, when I saw this on your wrist, I've got to say, it's a bit like a jacket or a pair of shoes that either fit you or they don't.
Yeah.
That's what sizes are.
Yeah.
It's not like a thing that gets you judge people on, because I think we can be quite judgmental on size. Hey, I mean, most people commenting under Hodinkee stories and others, anything above 41, it's like no, that's crazy, or it's got to be 37.5. But truth is, this fits you beautifully, and that to me is what a watch should be. immediately when I see it, I see these very large subdials. Like they're almost what's the word? Sort of blown up, a little bit blown up. They're very much taking up the whole dial, and also the gold hands echoing the markers. That's what I see straight away on there.
But I also think that the stepped circular case
Stunning.
with the subdials,
stunning.
it all just comes together, and the proportions of it. I mean, I like my small watches as well, and so it's just special. It's such a special piece.
It really is.
And so how's it felt since? I mean, because again, this is. Now look, that was the other thing with neo vintage, is in buying a Perpetual Calendar Gold Vacheron Constantin. You're not going to get it for the price you got this for at all, which is why lots of people are going towards neo vintage, which I think is great options out there. You can get some absolutely incredible pieces for incredible value. But then when I say value, of course, to mere mortals, the amount you spent on it's a lot of money. So how have you felt since taking the big plunge? Do you look at your watch differently? Do you feel different when you wear it? As in, what's the feeling been since you've been wearing it?
I think every watch, every time you put on a different watch, you can feel a bit different about yourself. When I wear this, I like to dress up a bit more because I feel like I would do the watch a bit of a disservice by just putting on like a hoodie and some shorts or something. It's
not as versatile as a sub, right?
Well, that's the point. So the sub is very versatile. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. And I just feel like that this watch was built for a certain type of person when it was produced, and I want to be true to that. I want to be true to the watch as well. So I think this watch brings me up. I definitely dress up for it, and it makes me feel better about it. And I often find myself just staring at it. I think there's so much going on with the dial. I think it's interesting. So I often get a bit lost when I'm looking at this watch.
You don't do that when you're driving, though?
No, I don't. Thankfully, I don't.
It's dangerous, though. I found that.
I might be wrong, but the movement in there, I think, is the same as in our jumbos as well. I think it's the 2121 caliber, the JLC with as the base, and then on top of it, there's a module, which is...
That's correct.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I actually took this into the Vacheron store a couple of days ago.
They showed the case. They took the case back off.
Yeah, they did. They had a look at it. They registered like all the serials, and got an extract coming in the post, which is great. So it came with service papers, in 2022, which was really nice, and that was done by Vacheron. So, bit of buyer's confidence there as well. But yeah, I've got the extract coming in the post, and Vacheron were amazing. They were super helpful with.
Do you know what's really funny is yesterday I was doing a piece for my friend Chris Hall, who's at Mr. Porter Watches, and he does a newsletter called The Fourth Wheel, and I'm guest posting for him. And the question in this guest post was, if you could only collect one brand forever, it's a first world problem, but what would it be? If you could only collect one brand, and my answer was Vacheron, for a number of reasons, but because the archive is amazing, so you can dive really deep into the past. There's great modern stuff. There's artistry, there's enameling, there's engraving, there's all that artistry world if you want it. But more than that, I had the opportunity to go to the archives, actually in their manufacturing Geneva, downstairs. It's literally a vault. It's a fireproof vault, waterproof, no dust, no nothing. Yeah. They've got drawers full of catalogues from 50, 60, 70 years ago. Every order handwritten in the book. The princess from Estonia who ordered that one-of-one gem set pocket watch or whatever, that's written out. And it's just insane. And not many brands will do that. And I think actually, linking back to the Omega story and the Philips thing, is to what extent will a brand, if you invest in them, to what extent will they invest in you as the owner and support you with information on the watch? Right. For example, Breguet, I bought a Breguet, I sold a Breguet recently. They didn't help me at all in the store. They offered me no information and were unwilling to offer any information on it. Whether they had information or not, to me, that's a little bit sad. And I had a visceral response to that. Just a thought, just an insight.
But that also might be why Breguet
are where they are.
Whereas Vacheron, I mean, I was telling you, I went into a Vacheron store years ago, and they still communicate with me to this day. And I've never bought a Vacheron from them, but the way they treat you, it does feel like luxury, and you do get that. Now, look, the demand for a Vacheron, the overseas has got a fair amount of demand. It's not the same as a Royal Oak. So, Audemars Piguet and Patek's, it is busy. You've got to book your appointments. It's tougher, but they do things right.
Yeah, I agree.
I think and they do make you feel very special, and it's not forced sale or anything like that. They're really interested in anyone finding out about their history and everything else.
I think they've also built equity in their brand, and I think this was something I referenced in the article, was the elegance and the class of the brand is something that does take decades to develop and to generate. that watch is pure class. I mean, if I saw that across the room, there's just no two ways about it. It's understated elegance. It's almost elegance of a bygone era. It's almost with the sizes that we have these days. Big watches, you know. I mean, looking at Patek stuff recently is not. It's pretty garish. Some of it, right? It's not that understated luxury of the past, and that to me is.
It still is. I think there's a really good article on Revolution Watches which talks about the kind of holy trinity and this watch, or these era of watches specifically, these perpetual calendars, and it says that the Vacheron is the Harvard educated, smooth talking guy who is at the family dinner, and then the AP is, you know, the guy who comes in on a motorcycle
from the studio.
Yeah.
That must have been written. That must have been written by Way. Must have been written by Way, my old boss. My old boss.
So it was definitely written by Way. So, and it just shows you how each of those kind of holy trinity brands is viewed, and I think the Vacheron is probably the more subdued, quiet brother in the holy trinity. Who's a bit more classy and a bit more understated.
And again, as you say, is then if you see someone wearing a Vacheron, again, whereas sometimes with a Patek or an AP, it's a look what I've got to show my mates. Whereas if you see someone with a Vacheron, you go, no, again, they know their watches. So going nice full circle, if you do see someone wearing that watch, you are going to go up to them and speak to them. But if you see loads of people wearing it, like a Subdial thing, you're too scared.
Were you wearing that? No, you weren't wearing it, the Subdial, were you? No,
I wasn't.
You hadn't got it yet.
I hadn't got it then. It was actually, so I'd been looking at these perpetual calendars for quite a long time, and I'd learnt a lot about them. And I was thinking about getting a different piece, which I can't even remember now, which shows you how impressed I am by this watch. And it was Christy at Subdial who actually had one on that his friend had bought from Subdial, and I got to try it on there, and I thought, oh, this is the watch. And then within 2 weeks, I'd purchased a watch, a different one, of course. But yeah,
that is a good point though. As in, you know, because you have to go in and try. As in, if you're buying from Chron 24, so you've got to try and then find one that's similar somewhere, and then imagine what it would be with the one you bought. So did you find a model like that?
So yeah, I did try one on at Subdial.
Okay.
And I just loved it. I really loved it. And I spoke to some collectors there, and they said, you know, these are incredible pieces. Like they are built to last, and they're everything that I think you want out of a watch. And just having that age-old collector's experience, plus being able to see the watch, really cemented it in my head. And, you know, like I said, then it was a very quick decision to be just try. Like I found the right piece and moved quickly on it.
Matt, I think
I was going to say, just to close, what's next? Is there something? I mean, it's a ridiculous question because you're in love.
Yeah,
it's like asking you, you know, have you been chatting to that one on Tinder since you got
How's
married?
the receptionist doing?
Where's your secretary? No. I mean, is there anything that's in the mind? I mean, there kind of always is, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. I've got an Anno Dane coming in sometime later this year, which I've been on the wait list for maybe 2 years. I just think they're a great watch. I lived in Scotland for nearly a decade, and so I love trying to support Scottish brands. But also I just think they're doing something really interesting with their enamel dialing, something that you don't typically see at anything under, you know, 5 figures. So they are doing a great job, and so I've got one of their Fume dials coming soon. I haven't picked it yet, so I think I'm going to go with the plum dial. But they've also got some stunning. They've got a stunning racing green as well, which seems to be.
It's artisanal watchmaking at an approachable price point.
Absolutely,
which is amazing. That opens up watchmaking and the watchmaking we love to more people, which is great.
And that is a dial, right? Those dials. I mean, you know, AP would have. They're incredible to finish on the enameling and all of that. But as in, we were actually chatting beforehand, saying, it'd be interesting if they could do a collab with, you know, a company maybe makes better movements or whatever,
of course,
and something like that.
Or even a case, something unusual.
Unusual. But I've only ever heard good things about Anno.
They've recently reached out, and they've done a collab with Fabric, a company out of Germany, to help them speed up their dial production. So they have enamel dials which are made in Germany, and so it's a bit more. It opens up the brand to some collectors who haven't been able to join the wait list for their in-house enamel dials. But like Pete was saying, I think, you know, they either use Lejeune or Salita movements at the moment, and it would be cool if they could, partner up with someone who is doing an in-house movement, or something a bit different, like a case, and really trying to kind of fuse those design languages into something very special.
Imagine like a Scottish movement maker, if there were a Scottish movement maker, or even new old stock movements, like that would be interesting.
They did something really interesting. They did a collaboration with Rebecca Sutherland.
Is it Rebecca Struthers? No.
Rebecca Struthers, sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry.
Because she does basically just take those old movements and restore them.
So sorry, Rebecca Struthers. Yeah, I'm actually reading a book by her at the moment, which I would recommend.
Very
highly.
good. Yeah, I can't remember. God, we should give that a plug. Can't remember what it's called now, but she's lovely woman.
And so Rebecca Struthers used them to design the typeface for one of her very, very high-end pieces, and it was really interesting to see something so affordable, in that kind of £2,000 to £3,000 price bracket, that kind of typeface on a watch that is, nearly 100 times, could be 100 times more expensive, in that £100,000 to £200,000 range. And that was really interesting.
Right, so you'll be back for the Annual Dane when it arrives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about that one, Manny. Well, thank you so much. That was brilliant.
Yeah, fantastic.
Very, very kind.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you with us. And as always, guys, please leave your comments below. Let us know what you thought of that Vacheron. We'll get some photos of it up. But until next time,
yeah,
go well.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.